Welcome back to JDM Legends presented by Turn 14 Distribution. Today we're going to start troubleshooting some of the drivability issues we've been having with the Supra.
What's going on, PT? Are you trying to tell me something here?
Team
over the Supra life?
Team Nissan all the way. I'm not over it, but I am patiently waiting to work on the GTR, which is hopefully going to come soon once we finish this thing up, and we are very close. What we're going to do today is try to figure out the transmission issue that we have. As you guys probably watched in a previous episode, it wasn't shifting properly. We have a couple of warning lights going off. So let's jump inside and I'll explain what we're going to start with. If you guys recall, in the episode that we took this car for a drive, we had some weird stuff going on with the transmission. First of all, thank you to all of you who commented, gave me some suggestions on it. What I think is happening, we certainly do have a limp mode. The flashing lights do actually mean it's like a check engine light for the auto gearbox. So we will get down to checking that out in a moment. I don't necessarily think that the gearbox itself is broken. I just think there's something going on. But before we go any further, what I want to do is read the engine codes, and there is a way, or the transmission codes, and there is a way by, you know, the old school method of like the light flashing at you 5 short times and then, 2 long times, and then we can read the code from there. So we'll do that in a moment. But before that, I want to make sure that we don't have any issues with the check engine light. And as you can see, the key is on here, and we do not have any of these lights turning on, which is a problem. So I'm going to start off by taking this apart and looking at the wiring on here. Here is the display in question, and I'm looking at the plug. Everything seems to be fine. There's no issues there. So from here, I can't really see much. I'm going to open this up, and then we can kind of have a further examination of it. Back in the day, if you had a check engine light and you really didn't want to figure out what the problem was, you would simply pull a bulb and it would magically disappear. Those days are long gone, and I'm looking at these bulbs and they seem to be all in good working order, so I don't think that's the case. You can see this ribbon on here though does not look to be broken. However, when I look at it a little bit more, I don't know if you guys can see that or hear that. Like, listen closely.
Yeah, it sounds crunchy.
The welds here are actually broken. I can see when I move it back and forth, the welds are broken. So we have an issue here. I've got the soldering set out here. This is a Dremel setup off of Amazon. It works quite well, actually. I do like it. I am no pro at soldering, so be kind, but really, it's not that difficult here. All I'm doing is using a little bit of flux on the broken connections. I'm coming in with this, adding a bit of solder to the tip as such, and then going in on here and just adding it back in. So there we go. Look at that. So 2 down, 5 more to go, and I think we're gonna be good here. So after soldering all the connections up here, I realized that all the cold solders or welds on the connector were also broken. So I've essentially resoldered everything here that has a connection. So let's get this thing back in here and then hooked up, and let's test it. All right, in the moment of truth. Whoa, look at that. Oh, and it's blinking already, because I did hook up, there's a diagnostic port down here, and if you jump the T, E at 1, and I think the E1 connector, it goes into diagnostic mode. Okay, so I just had a look online, and this confirms that this is in testing mode, which is good. However, we reset the battery. We had the battery off when we were just finishing up putting this car together, which means any type of error code, even with the transmission, would not be present right now. So we're gonna put this back together, take this car for a quick drive, come back, and then we'll jump back in here and see what kind of codes we have. Okay, the good news is we do not have a check engine light. So as I suspected, I don't think there's anything fundamentally wrong with the motor. However, we do have the overdrive light blinking at me. We do have the slip control light blinking at me. So we're gonna move on to now checking those transmission codes. So I've got the diagnostic terminal jumped again, and we do have a 89 code on the overdrive off button blinking, which in turn means open or short circuit in communication between the track ECU and ECM. So that means there is an error somewhere in what I believe is the traction control system. I think what we're going to start off by doing is just making sure that all the fuses and everything are there, because it is a common thing to pull the traction control out to disable a bunch of features, like I think like speed limiter, and there's something about like revving it out a little bit more with that whole system unplugged. So let's start with that, and then let's hope that it isn't the actual ECU itself. Digging through a few of the Supra forums posts, I've come to the conclusion that there's a lot of different scenarios that people are saying. Some people say it could be the ECU capacitors. Some people are saying the traction control ECU could be bad. However, a bunch of people are saying that there's a speed sensor signal that runs to the back of the gauge cluster, and then from there runs to the ECU. And that solder can break off as well, or just be damaged and not work properly, which in turn may cause this fault. So it's a super easy fix. I just take it apart and then I just like splice the wire so it doesn't go into the tack. It really doesn't need to do much there. And judging by the fact that these solders here were so bad, maybe that could be our culprit. So we're gonna start there. So I'm gonna have to rip apart, everything apart here to get to the back of the cluster. So I misspoke there. It's not the gauge cluster that has these two wires. It's actually the odometer. So these are the two wires here. I'm just gonna cut them and splice them together, and let's see if that's fixed our problem. Fingers crossed. There's one really weird thing that we have heard happening now that we've kind of been playing around here. I don't know if I can reproduce it for you guys right now, but if you listen closely, the traction control system, actually, you know what? Let's just jump into the engine bay. I'll talk about it there. So you may be wondering what this is on the throttle body, and this is that traction control system that I think I mentioned in a previous episode. It actually has a butterfly on their throttle plate, and it works as such, but it's just controlled by this motor. And if something is wrong in this system here, that can also trigger all the lights. But when I key on or we key off, you'll listen. If you listen, you can hear this motor kind of like making weird noises. You see that? So
yeah.
there's like a weird noise happening there. And when we run the engine, we can also hear it going like it's trying to set something, or the positioning is off. Let me see if I can repeat it for you guys here. I'll start the car up right now. Do you hear that? It might be really hard to hear, but you can hear it's like doing this weird oscillation thing where it's like going back and forth.
It's like a turn signal. Tick,
Yeah.
Tick tock.
Yeah. Yeah, and I bet you that's the throttle plate going back and forth hitting, and now it's stopped. So
It's like it's trying to go through its full range.
yeah.
It's not seeing the
something
numbers
is
it wants.
happening that's off there for sure. All right, guys, we want to give you a quick update. It is the next day. I did a little bit of research. I looked more at wiring and all this stuff, and everything is pointing towards the traction control ECU. That mod that I did where I spliced those two wires behind the odometer did nothing, and what it actually did do is make the odometer stop working.
Weird.
So I don't know how online people say that that's the right way to do it, but everything I see now, like from our experience, was that was not something that was worthwhile doing, unfortunately.
Yeah.
So the upside is, though, driving the car right now, like you can see, look at it downshifts.
Yeah.
And they're like it's making power. The transmission is actually working properly. So I don't know if it's because we fixed the check engine light and like this whole cluster here of lights.
Yeah.
But this car is essentially a different car. Like despite all the warning lights, like the slip control light and all that, like this car will shift properly. It goes through the gears properly. So let me just quickly show you.
Mm-hmm.
You can see here, it responds so much nicer. Like this is just a little bit of throttle. It stays in the gear there. Excuse everything being loud. You can see we still do have that door card off. So
Yep.
it's not as luxurious as a Lexus, DP. That is for a fact. But look at, like, feel that, right? Like
Yeah,
it's
it does
so
feel
much better.
yeah.
And if I'm driving right now and I need to, like, look at, if I hit it, look, it downshifted properly.
Yeah.
So
Yeah, it drives like a car should drive now.
yeah, it so does, which is pretty awesome. And now we have ourselves a truck blocking the road here.
Yeah, and it's gonna back up. Yeah, this is great. It's idling pretty well too.
It idles well, man. The only thing that now has changed is I can't turn the slip control off, so the traction control off, which again is just like so unnerving. I don't know what is going on here, but like, you know, I can't do anything about that, which is a bummer. But look at that shifted. Remember before it was like so lazy?
Oh, it was mega lazy.
Yeah,
it was
so
like a limp motor.
Now it certainly feels really nice. So if I just like hammer this here. Whoa, yeah, man. So see, like it shifted properly, it held the gear, so it's working there. We hit a total of 20 PSI DP.
Dude, that's not good.
So yeah, I won't be flooring it anymore. I just wanted to show you guys everything seems to work. This thing is a rocket ship for those little two twins. But yeah, so getting back to the gearbox, this is just even more frustrating for me because right now we have ourselves a car that is running and driving properly, but all of these lights are blinking in our face telling us like, oh, something is wrong, something is wrong. We're like, look, there, you heard it there, it downshifted, it's making 9 pounds of boost.
Yeah, it does seem to drive well.
Everything seems to be working so well, but what is going on with all of these lights and these faults, right?
Yeah, obviously we need to prevent overboosting too, but that's a separate issue.
We'll get into that afterwards. Like right now, I just want to make sure that this thing is without these lights, but I'm worried that we may not even get there, you know, like replacing that ECU is I think the only option we have right now.
Yeah, start with replacing the traction control unit and see if that fixes the problem. Can we find one of those? Is that going to be impossible to find?
I think there's a lot of them out there because people have done the, you know, automatic to manual transmission conversions. So yeah, we're also gonna have to raise this car a bit.
Too low,
so it is certainly too low. But yes, getting back to that, I don't think it's gonna be too difficult to find that, and I hope it is that, because it also could be the ECU. Like if the ECU has some leaking capacitors, it could also be a culprit. But so far, I'm just gonna chalk this one up to the traction control ECU being our problem, and you know, we're gonna regroup here, and once we have one, and then swap it out and hope that clears it up, because on the M5 wagon, the ABS control unit was a problem, and then we swapped it out and it all went away, right?
Yeah.
So let's hope that that's the case. So I think at this point we are going to have to say we're wrapping this episode, and that is because we're gonna have to try to source that traction control ECU and maybe another ECU. So I tore this apart and had a look at the capacitors, because people were saying that capacitors do go bad. And I'll post the photos because obviously we couldn't get a camera in there. It was just like so tight to show that stuff. I'll post the photos of what they look like, but it looks like some of them are leaking. I just don't know if that means they're bad. They're not like bowing and kind of like bulgy, which is usually the case when a capacitor goes bad. That's when you'll know it's like fully bad. In this situation, there is some ooze underneath them. So why don't you guys post in the comments, let me know, do you think that means that the ECU could be having a failure? Because that code 89 means it's not communicating with the ECU. So we could have an issue in the ECU, or we could have an issue in that track control system. And the question really remains, do we really want to keep chasing the idea of making that track control system work? Because truthfully, it just feels invasive. It just doesn't feel like it's a real traction control system at all. It's just so old technology. So again, post in the comments, should we just delete that thing and just say, screw it, pull some light bulbs, and then this thing will be running perfectly as you guys just saw. So thank you once again for watching. If you certainly enjoyed this episode, make sure to give us a thumbs up and a subscribe with that notification bell. Those certainly go a long way to helping our videos make it into the algorithm.
Right in this area here. All right.
Okay.
Yeah.